morning, everybody. It's Brad Berzer for our very final, and I do mean final, sadly, our final Christian Humanist class. I hope you guys are all doing well. I want to thank you all very much for putting up with all of this. I realize this has been one truly bizarre semester, and you should be very proud that you've made it through. Amazing. I appreciate all the kind emails you guys have sent me and the encouragement, because believe me, sitting here and just talking into my Macintosh is really, really surreal. So I thank you guys very much, and I hope that I've been able to at least keep you entertained this semester with a lot of these ideas that I do cherish and I do love. So at least there was passion in this. There was definitely passion. I think is unquestionable. Whether that passion was always expressed in the best way, that might be an open question. But I want to thank you guys very much, really, for putting up with me, and I do want you to know that I do have the image in my head of all of you sitting out there in front of me, and I miss that classroom, lane 236, right? And I can smell the coffee. Can't you smell that coffee? I mean, it just wafts in right there from, oh my gosh, yeah, it was great. And every time someone opens the door and the draft comes through, and yeah, that room, yeah, great memories. So anyway, I know it's been, what, 6-7 weeks since I've seen you guys. So crazy. But anyway, I hope you're all doing well. I hope that the semester ends well for everybody. I would remind you, as I sent out that email yesterday, I would remind you that our final, I had it wrong in one of the emails, and thank you, Emma, very much for reminding me and letting me know that I had that wrong. I very much appreciate that. But our final is on Thursday, April 30th from 8 to 10 Eastern Standard Time. And some of you have emailed me already because you can't take it that time. I understand. You do have the final, right? You guys got it. No tricks, no multiple choice questions, no Berzer trivia. You've got it. So you get those two questions. One, define Christian humanism. It's kind of a doozy, I admit, but come on, a little bit on the nose. Define Christian humanism for a class on Christian humanism. And the second one, a little bit trickier, but not really. And that is to explain what it means to be both Jewish and Christian within a canonical for Leibowitz. So that the basis of that question is, of course, to look at the Wandering Jew as well as at the Abbey and think about what it means in Western civilization that so much of the West is based on the idea of a Jewish people and a Christian religion. Right? So that is really the essence of that question. And you don't need to do any research beyond canonical for Leibowitz. You should be able to draw that out just from the novel. And yeah, write 2 good essays for me, guys, and we'll call that a good semester, and it hasn't been a good semester. A couple of you have started sending in your papers to me. I very much appreciate that. This is always kind of a highlight of my semester, to read those papers. Those papers are technically due, so I'm giving this lecture for tomorrow, April 28th, and those papers are technically due at 11:59 on April 28th, 11:59, right before midnight. So 11:59 p.m., those are due. And just have those emailed to me. If you can, email them to me in a PDF form. I would really appreciate that, and I'm very much looking forward to reading those. That will be the rest of my week and your finals. And I should have all of your grades to you. If you want to know, I should have them done by Friday or Saturday of this week. So I've got the midterms recorded, of course, but yeah, I have those as well that are coming up, your final and your final paper. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more than just bloviate about housekeeping things, but do remember those dates. So make sure that you have your paper into me by April 28th. That should be the date you're listening to this, or if you're listening to this on the day I recorded it, tomorrow, right, at just a minute before midnight, have those to me. And don't forget that your final, then, is on April 30th from 8 to 10 Eastern Standard Time. Okay, So the last thing I want to do is just briefly kind of sum up my own thoughts on what Christian humanism is and how we can envision a Christian humanism that is effective, one that is respectful of the past, and also understanding, really, I mean, the whole goal of the course has been to understand how does the human person properly defined fit into our vision of history. And I think there are a couple of different ways that we could look at this. And we've touched on all of these during the semester. So I'm really not saying anything new. But I think most importantly, of course, we must consider the human person as to be an unrepeatable center of dignity and freedom. Right? No single human person will ever come again. We get this one moment, this one brief moment in life. And I realize it doesn't seem brief at the moment as we're all kind of going through this period of the plague right now and our social distancing. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think probably those of us who study Christian humanism have a fascinating insight on what's going on right now. Because two things that I think as human persons we must avoid at all costs is social distancing. And I'm not making a political claim here at all. I recognize why, from the standpoint of science, we must social distance, but it's not natural for human beings. We are meant to live in a polis. We are meant to interact with one another. So it's very strange that we've been isolated in this way. It's very counter to all of our human proclivities. But the other thing that we have to be careful about, and this, I think, we know as well from studying Christian humanism, one of the deadliest things that can ever happen to the human person is boredom and monotony and having the same thing in the regularity, the patterns that never end, where we just go through the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, you imagine, and I know you guys are missing this because you're not on campus, but imagine what your life is like. Just give it one day at home with the family routine and everything that you do at home versus one day at college. One day at college is the equivalent of like 5 days in normal life, maybe even more. I mean, doesn't it feel like what happened in January of this semester was years ago? And this is because the college dynamic, partly, we're just always moving so quickly, but you never ever run out of things to do. There's no such thing as boredom in college. You are constantly moving from one assignment to the next assignment, from one idea to the next idea, from one class to the next idea, from one meal with this group of people to another meal with that group of people. And you always have this constant dynamic. So college is basically real life sped up times 100. It's real life on steroids. And that doesn't change even for someone like me at age 52. I don't eat with you guys and I don't share, the same kind of living quarters that you have. So I've got that life outside of school. But believe me, when I'm in school, classes fly by. 50 minutes do not seem like 50 minutes to me. It's not as though I go in and start counting the clock. Oh, am I going to be done here soon? I mean, that time flies by. And now we're in this weird time where we're asked not only to be away from other people, but we're asked just to kind of fall into a monotony. And that is incredibly, incredibly dangerous for the very psychology, for the psyche, for the very norm of the human person. So again, I'm not trying to pass any kind of commentary. I mean, I've got my own views. I'm sure you're shocked by that, and my views are very strong. And I've gotten very cranky over the last several weeks about government policies and bureaucratic screw-ups and trying to decide, is this malicious or is this just stupidity? I don't know. And I've got opinions and views about all of this, but I have opinions and views about everything. So, big deal, Purser. I don't think anybody's shocked by that. But for this class, as I try to be somewhat objective, I think we can just say, what a fascinating experiment. You guys got to have a full half semester normal, where you could compare time to the semester, this half of the semester, where time doesn't have quite the same meaning. And that's what a weird thing in human history that you get to observe. I mean, let's hope it's weird. Who wants this to be the new normal? May it always be the abnormal, the truly abnormal. But still, you got to live in this abnormal. And I don't want to be too fatherly here about this, guys, but I've emailed you, just a couple of you, about 3 of you about this. But I want you to keep in mind, especially if you're seniors, that you will always be the class that survived this. And I know Dr. Arnn said this the other day in his beautiful convocation address, but you will always be the class that survived the coronavirus. You'll never be forgotten in the history of Hillsdale. That's pretty cool when you think about it. And I know it's got to be so painful for you guys to be away from each other. I mean, I see how much you love one another. I see how much you care for one another. I see just what it is that you guys share with one another. I see that as a professor, and I see it as a dad. And hopefully it's just Brad, too. I mean, I see all that, and it's moving. It's moving when you guys include me in that, and you do include me in that, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. I feel like at age 52, I'm finally one of the cool kids. How great is that? You guys are all the cool kids. So, I mean, it's wonderful. But, you'll never forget the FaceTime that you had with each other. 50 years from now, 30 years from now. I mean, last week, I called my best friend from college just to say hey, and we only had about 10 minutes with each other. But it was enough. He was my roommate, and he's still one of my best friends. One of my 2 or 3 closest friends, best friends I've ever had in my life. Guy who understands me so well. And we didn't have a lot of time, but we still remember very well, all the weird and crazy and wonderful moments of our senior year, which was 1989 and 1990. That's a long time ago. Imagine for you guys, and I know it's hard to imagine, but you're 21 now. Imagine when you're my age, 52. You get to call each other. Hey, you remember this? You remember how weird that was? Yeah, you'll actually have a special memory about it. So it's painful now, but you'll have a special memory that you guys were always that class. It's going to mean something to you, and you'll remember it bizarrely in ways that you don't remember the things that became, they should never have been, they just do though, that become mundane. Right? But college dilates the life experience. And I'm not just bloviating here. I want you guys to understand that part of what this class is doing is to try and understand, and I hope this has been clear, we're trying to figure out what life is. We're trying to figure out what time means. We have played with time in this class because time is a way of understanding history. We have played with it more, I would guess, than almost any other class you've had at college, except for maybe some of your English classes. This has been, and not in any way scientific, of course. That would be, Tim Dolch would laugh at me if I said we've been playing with science in this, but we have been playing from a humanities standpoint with time. How quickly does it move? How much does it slow down? What does it mean at this moment versus that moment? Are we trapped in cycles? Are we not in cycles? What does the grace of Jesus Christ do to the cycles that we live in? And of course, we can say ultimately the incarnation does not destroy the cycles. It fulfills them and betters them in so many ways. Right? Grace does not destroy nature. It perfects nature. And that is amazing, I think, when we think about this and try and understand what this class, at least to me, why the topic of Christian humanism is never mundane for me. It is always fascinating. It always gets to the very heart of existence, at least as I understand it. And when we read things like Willa Cather or Walter Miller, and Miller is hilarious and depressing all at the same time. He is brilliant and witty. There are moments throughout that entire novel where you just scratch your head and you think, is he completely mocking my faith? Or is he actually showing how deep my faith is? Right? He does that. And it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Christian. He really gets under the skin of everybody. And I think that's one of his great successes, that he's able to do that and create this story that really never lets you stop questioning what's going on. And Yeah, there are others who can do that. Philip K. Dick can do that. But Philip K. Dick doesn't have the optimism that Walter Miller does. Philip K. Dick, you know that when he starts questioning time, you're doomed, because it means somehow your sanity is losing it. You don't lose your sanity with Canticle for Leibowitz. You gain it in some way. Humor is meant to direct us towards the most beautiful things. And one thing I think is unquestionable in Walter Miller: he loves the Logos, right? He worships the Logos. This is his God. Jesus is his God. And that's pretty cool. No matter how much he might make fun of things, that is at the center of it. But think about T.S. Eliot. Think about all the modernist poetry. Think about the ideas of imagism and how much we have played with the notion of time, whether we're in Little Gidding or we're at Burnt Norton, wherever we are, or if we're in the deserts of Utah with this crazy little monk, Francis. Right? We're always thinking about time. We've done that all semester. I mean, I'd love if someone ever asked me, Berzer, what are you doing in your Christian humanism class? It'd be fun just to say, well, we're playing with notions of time, because that's really what we've been doing. We've been thinking about language and time, cadence and time, personality and time, normality and time, abnormality and time. So time, very, very important for all of us. Oh, that sounded like a Trump statement, didn't it? Time, very, very important. Oh my. Okay, so let me give you 5 things. Remember when we talked about Russell Kirk, he gave us 6 things of what it meant to be a conservative. We didn't talk about this as much, but Robert Nisbet gives us 6 things to be a conservative. I want to give us 5 things just because I want to be different. And we'll use odd numbers instead of even numbers here. I want to give 5 things that I think are really important to understand what a Christian humanist is. So, number 1, a humanist without question, must believe in the dignity of every single human being. God makes nothing in vain, but only grace perfects nature, right? That's what we're getting at here. Every single human person, past, present, and future, has purpose. God does not make wasteful things. Everything has a purpose. We are each born in a certain time and a certain place with certain gifts, a common sin. We all have that common sin that comes from Adam and Eve. We all share that, but we also share that we each have gifts and graces. Our gifts are very different, one from another. That's God showing us his beauty in each one of us. He gives person A this, and person B this, and person C this. And somehow, miraculously, all of that comes together into a community at the moment and a community over time. It is the community, it is the brotherhood, it is the sisterhood of all men and women across times. Right? So we are burdened with many flaws, but we are endowed with many, many, many gifts. And no person is a waste. Even those people we meet who may be our mortal enemy on the battlefield, there's something within that person, some grace that God has given them that has allowed them to breathe, that has allowed them to be, that has allowed them to exist. And for that very reason, that person is still redeemable. Right? And that's how we must view each other. We must view each other as God would view ourselves, as God would view us. We must view each other with, as C.S. Lewis said, bearing that weight of glory. All right, number 2. And there, for obvious reasons, this has to be number 2. Number 1 has to be number 1. Right? If we don't start by seeing the dignity of every human person, regardless of accidents of birth, regardless of religion, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of language, if we don't get that, we're not going to get anything else. We must view the human person with dignity. Number 2, the greatest way to leaven the human person and to bring the best out of the human person is through the liberal arts. The liberal arts extend to the past, through the present, into the future. They allow Socrates and Heraclitus to speak to us, and us to speak to our great-great-great-great-grandchildren. The liberal arts allow us to get out of ourselves and to speak to something beyond our generation and to find those things that are timeless within human existence. We find what is universal when we speak to one another through time and across time. The liberal arts are meant to liberate us, why they are liberal, from the things of this world and to allow us to engage our higher selves, to find that part of us which is eternal. And so it is only in the liberal arts that we truly shape ourselves for those things higher than what we are. And that is not to diminish the legal arts or by any means the fine arts or the vocational arts, but those are arts generally, not the fine arts, but vocational, legal arts, business arts. Those are the arts that teach us how to exist in this world. That's great. Those things are great. But it's the liberal arts that liberate us from the things of this world and teach us about those things that are eternal. And I would take this to the extreme. I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are, meaning that you're at least age of reason. And I don't care when or where you are. Kindergarten should be the place that we start teaching the liberal arts to the human person. In fact, it should be in the home before that. But in kindergarten, we can start telling the great stories. We can start introducing students not just to an understanding of ideas and numbers and things like that, but we can start introducing them to many great stories. We can teach the flood to a kindergartner. We can probably even teach aspects of Homer to a kindergartner. Certainly, we can start getting ready the ideas of what needs to be learned, and we can start introducing vocabulary, both Greek and Latin, to our children. Right? And that's language, at least categories, philosophical categories. So I'm not calling for a liberal education just in college. I'm calling for a liberal education everywhere, through all centers, through all parts and all levels of education. And we do have that in certain ways. Montessori is nothing if not liberal arts for preschoolers and kindergartners. That's what Montessori is. Maria Montessori was one of the great liberal educators of our previous age, right, of the age of the 20th century. Montessori was fantastic about this. She was in many ways the ultimate Christian humanist, especially in what she was able to accomplish. Beautiful, Maria Montessori, absolutely beautiful. Number 3, we must always recognize, contrary to both a secularist and a fundamentalist understanding of humanism, that humanism is never about the glorification of the human person. It is always about the centering of the human person. That is, we understand that man is higher than the animals, is higher than the rocks, is higher than the vegetation, but is lower than God. We somehow stand in between that which is material and that which is spiritual. And it is in this economy of grace, it is in this great chain of being that we understand who and what we are. And so, yes, we must understand that the human being is depraved. But we must also understand that we are temples of the Holy Spirit and that we bear the Imago Dei. It is not enough merely to believe that we bear the Imago Dei, for then we'll ignore the sin. But it's also not enough merely to look at the sin, because then we ignore God's beauty and His grace. We must recognize in this via media that we are both depraved and glorified at the same time, that there are aspects of us that seek the good, the true, and the beautiful, and only the good can do that. But there is also that element that weighs us down, that original sin that we have inherited. And if we don't understand original sin, we will never understand the human person at all. So We must think about the economy of nature or grace, the great chain of being, as the Renaissance thinkers would have put it. But we can never glorify the human being as the highest of all things, but neither can we put the human being as the lowest of all things either. By the very fact we are endowed with the ability to seek the good, the true, and the beautiful means that we are above the natural things. We are endowed with something more than merely natural, and that, of course, is grace, that idea of grace, and that ability to love one another, and that ability to live in one another. Number 4, we must understand that if we are to hold together a view of the human person that is dignified and good and true and beautiful, we must be members of what we would call a republic of letters. And that republic of letters begins with the very first thinker who recorded his thoughts either through story or on the page, all the way to the last thinker who will live. We might call this, with Augustine, a kind of city of God, but for scholars and thinkers. We might call it Cicero's cosmopolis, but there is a polis somewhere that is greater than all of us, that contains all the great thoughts and the great ideas. And most thinkers, and I take this from Cicero, but I take it from Thomas More, and I take it from others, most have called this a republic of letters. And we have our own little community. In fact, what we could say is that our class this whole semester, H495, has been one neighborhood of one suburb of one city of the Republic of Letters. And in our little neighborhood, we've created our little front lawn libraries, and we're not being quarantined right now, not in our Republic of Letters. Right? We can go up to our little lending library and we can pick out our Cicero's on duties, or our Canticle for Leibowitz, or our Death Comes for the Archbishop, or Little Gidding. All of that's there. And we may run to the next neighborhood and we can put our books in their books and we can exchange them. And that can be their little neighborhood in the same suburb, but not quite our neighborhood. That's what we do. There is a republic of letters. And no matter what happens to each one of us, even if, God forbid, I were to pass away tomorrow, it wouldn't matter. We have each been citizens of our little neighborhood, in our little suburb, of our city, of the Republic of Letters. The Republic of Letters is across time. It is through time. It transcends time. And when time is over, we will enjoy one another's company. I mean, really, think about this. Who do you want to meet the moment that you pass away? I want to meet my daughter I lost. No question. I want to see my grandparents right away. I'd like to meet my dad. He died when I was 2 months old. That would be really cool to meet my dad. And once I've seen my daughter and my dad and my grandparents, I really want to meet J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I really want to meet him. And, in heaven, he's not going to be one of the cool kids that ignored me in junior high, right? I think he'll be happy. He's going to, who are you, right? I'm nobody. But I think he'll want to meet me. Just because I want to meet him, and it's heaven, right? I mean, we want to meet each other, don't we? I mean, can you imagine? And there are things I really, really want to ask Thomas More. There are things I want to ask George Washington. I mean, I want to know, well, why'd you do this? What'd you do this for? And it's not as though heaven is the end of our questioning. It's in heaven that we get our questions answered. It's not the end. In many ways, it's the beginning. Everything that you and I have been talking about this semester, we're just playing at what heaven is like. We're going to get to sit around. I get to meet Russell Kirk. I'm going to have a cigar with Russell Kirk. I'm going to have a brandy with Russell Kirk. I'm going to sit in really nice leather chairs by a fire. And I'm going to have Elrond playing music in the background. And Russell Kirk and I are going to share a cigar. And we're going to talk. And I'm going to ask him about certain things. I'm going to ask him about Clinton Wallace. I'm going to ask him why he didn't use banks. I'm going to ask him why he did this and not that. And I want to find out about his travels. And I'm still curious if he's as good a typist in heaven as he was here. Aren't there things you want to ask? I mean, can you imagine meeting C.S. Lewis? Jack. You mind if I call you Jack? Man, it's good to see you. I can't tell you how important you were to me. Yeah, I know. I know, Jack. I know it was all because of God's grace. I get that. But you were his agent. Man, you were good. You remember that scene you had where everybody was living their dreams in Narnia? And you reminded us that we don't want to live in our dreams because our dreams are self-centered. You remember that? My gosh, that was beautiful. Yeah. Remember how Eustace became a good guy? Yeah. Yeah. Remember Mark Studdick? Remember that he got out of things and that you had Venus descend upon him at the end of the novel? My gosh, Jack. How'd you do that? That's incredible. And I want to thank you. And I want to shake your hand. And I'm not in quarantine. I get to shake your hand. I mean, guys, can you imagine how awesome it's going to be? I mean, it's incredible. We're going to get to do that. That's our Republic of Letters. I mean, there it is. And of course, don't get me wrong. It's not the humanism part that's going to save us. It's the Christian part. But it is Christian humanism, right? We're going to get to do that. That's going to be really, really cool. There's so many people I want to meet. Yeah, I want to dance with my daughter. It's going to be great. All right. And finally, number 5. That is, number 5. While we don't all agree as humanists on everything, we're going to have differences of opinion. Russell Kirk is not always going to get along with Leo Strauss, but they're still on the same team. And by being on the same team, we recognize that there is something that we all believe in, and that is He who moves all things through the love of His love, from the first person to the second person, and the second person to the third person, and the third person to the first person. The love that moves the stars and the whole universe, right? That's number 5. We believe in God, Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and His only Son, Jesus Christ, and in the Holy Spirit, right? That's the Christian humanism ideal. Number 1, we start with dignity. Number 5, we end with beyond dignity. We move beyond tenebrae. We move out of the darkness and absolutely into the light. And that is our Christian humanism, but defined maybe as humanist Christianism. That didn't make sense, but you guys know what I mean. Humanity and Christianity, right, coming together. So those are the 5 things, the 5 most important things. All right, guys, I have nothing else to say. Well, that's not true. I've got lots and lots and lots of things to say, but I think that's pretty much it for the class. I want to thank you all once again for everything, for letting me share all of these things with you, for you sharing these things with me. I want to thank you especially for the papers that you're writing for me or have written for me. You guys don't know what a blessing it is to read those and see the kind of time that you put into them, the kind of energy, the kind of thought, the kind of beauty and truth and goodness in those papers. It is one of the great highlights of my academic life to read those papers and to see what you've come up with and to see how you've digested these things. And I guess it's funny. I mean, I realize that when we leave other classes, those of you who took the Civil War with me, you know every single detail from about 1848 up until about 1865. You know who won what battle, what parts of what battles were important. You know the names of the generals. You know what it was like having emergency surgery out on the battlefield. If you take the American Revolution with me, we start in basically 1749. We end in 1806. You know about Lewis and Clark. You know about Thomas Jefferson. You know about George Washington. You know about Edmund Burke. There are details about the Declaration and the Federalist Papers. You know all of that. This class is a little different. We don't really start in any one time, and we don't end in any one time. We just kind of jump around and think about things that matter. And nothing matters more than God. Amen, everybody. God bless you. Thank you for everything. And I hope that you've enjoyed this semester as much as I have.